This is the story of a disturbing and true birthday horror that I'm going to tell you. It didn't happen to me, but to a girl I knew back in college. Her name was Priya, and trust me, after I heard what happened to her, I never looked at birthdays the same way again. So listen carefully. It was her 21st birthday, and she had decided to celebrate it in a quiet way, just with a few friends. Not a big party, not too loud, just a cozy night at her home with close people. She lived in an old, rented house just outside the city. The house was big, but kind of creepy. Old wooden floors, long narrow hallways, and weird noises at night. But it was cheap, and she liked being alone. That night, 4 friends came over, 2 girls, 2 guys. They brought cake, snacks, and some drinks. They laughed, played music, and took silly photos. It was around 11:30 p.m. when Priya said she wanted to tell a scary story, just for fun. She had always loved ghost stories, but what none of them knew was that they were already part of one. So Priya began telling a story about the house itself. She said the landlord had once mentioned that the previous tenant, a woman in her 30s, had disappeared without a trace. No one knew where she went. Her things were still in the house for weeks until the landlord finally cleared them out. People said they saw lights flicker at night. Some even heard crying. Of course, everyone laughed it off. Just a story, one of them said, trying to scare us before midnight. Then the power went out. Just like that. Boom. Total darkness. At first, they thought it was a joke. Maybe someone turned off the lights on purpose. But they checked. Nothing. Had tripped. The entire house was dark. And the weird thing? The neighbors' lights were still on. The street outside was still glowing with the yellow of the street lamps. Only Priya's house was in the dark. They used their phone flashlights and tried to laugh it off. But something felt wrong. The air suddenly felt colder, like the temperature dropped in seconds. Then one of the girls, Aditi, said she heard something upstairs. A thud. Then slow footsteps. Everyone froze. Priya whispered, "Is someone else in the house?" But they all shook their heads. No one else had come in. The front door was locked, and the only other way in was the back door, which had a bolt from the inside. They stood there, silent, holding their breath. And then, knock, knock, knock. 3 soft knocks from the bedroom upstairs. No one moved. They didn't even breathe. "Maybe someone's playing a prank," said one of the guys, Arun. He tried to act brave and went to check. He climbed the stairs slowly, his phone light shaking in his hand. The others stayed behind, watching him disappear into the dark. Then suddenly, he screamed. A loud, horrible scream that made their blood freeze. He came running down, pale as a ghost. "There's someone in the room," he gasped. "I saw her. I swear I saw a woman just standing there." Everyone panicked. They thought of running out, but Priya said, "Wait, the keys. I left them upstairs." Why would she do that? No one knew. But the keys to the back door were in the drawer upstairs, and the front door was jammed. It always stuck during monsoon season. So now, someone had to go back up. 2 of them decided to go, Priya and one friend, Saurav. The others stayed downstairs, shaking, holding their phones like weapons. Priya and Saurav slowly walked up the stairs. The air felt heavier, like walking through water. They reached the room, and Priya opened the door. It was empty. No woman, no one, but everything felt wrong. The furniture looked slightly moved. The curtains were fluttering even though the window was shut. They grabbed the keys and rushed back down, but when they came down, the living room was empty. The others were gone. No one there. Just silence. Priya shouted for them. Nothing. She looked around. Their phones, snacks, even the cake was still there. But no people. Then she noticed something chilling. There were footprints. Wet footprints. Coming from the stairs and going toward the kitchen. Barefoot. Small feet, like a woman's, but no one else was barefoot. They followed the prints to the kitchen and found the back door wide open. Now they were truly scared. They ran out into the backyard, calling their friends' names. And then they saw them, standing, still near the edge of the trees, staring at something they couldn't see. All three of them, Aditi, Arun, and Meena, just standing there, not moving. Priya ran to them, shaking them, calling out their names. Slowly, they turned to look at her. Their faces were blank, eyes wide, like they were hypnotized. Then one of them whispered, "She said she wants to come back." "Who?" Priya asked, heart racing. "The one who had her birthday here on before you." Suddenly, all of them collapsed, just like that. Dropped to the ground. They were breathing, but unconscious. Priya called the police. By the time help arrived, it was morning. The power was back. The house looked normal. The friends slowly woke up, but none of them remembered what happened. Not even Aaron, who had seen the woman. The police didn't believe them. Said maybe they drank too much. Maybe it was stress. Hallucination. But Priya knew. She found something after they left. A small photo hidden in the drawer upstairs. A woman's photo. On the back, it said, "To myself, happy 30th birthday. May this house finally feel like home." The photo was dated exactly 10 years before, on the same date. Same day. Priya moved out the next week. She never celebrated her birthday again. And me? After she told me this, I always wonder if the woman is still there, waiting for someone else to celebrate their birthday in that house. So, if your birthday's coming up, and someone invites you to a quiet house party in an old house, maybe think twice. Just maybe. This is the story of a disturbing true birthday horror that I'm going to tell you. It happened to my friend Laura, and it's something I'll never forget. I'm not sure if I believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but after hearing what happened to her, it's hard not to wonder. It all started on Laura's 25th birthday. She had been planning it for months. She wanted a special day, not just the typical party with cake and presents. She chose a small cabin in the woods for a weekend getaway with her closest friends, her boyfriend, Tom, and a few of their college friends. They rented the place online, a quiet, secluded spot that promised peace and privacy. A perfect escape from the noise of the city. The cabin was beautiful, wooden walls, a stone fireplace, and big windows that looked out onto the dense forest. It had everything they needed for a relaxing weekend: comfortable bedrooms, a fully equipped kitchen, and even a hot tub outside. But there was one thing that Laura couldn't shake off when they first arrived. The owner, an old man with a weathered face, had been a bit too eager to give them the keys. He told them to enjoy their stay, but there was something odd in his eyes, a kind of urgency in his voice. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the place had been abandoned for years, and that it hadn't been used much since the last tenants had moved out. Laura laughed it off. "It's an old place, that's all. He's just being weird," she told Tom, brushing away any bad feelings. They were here to celebrate her birthday after all. Nothing could spoil that. The first day was perfect. They went hiking, had a picnic, and spent hours just talking and laughing by the fire. But as night fell, things started to get strange. It was around 9 p.m. when they decided to sit outside on the porch with some wine, enjoying the night air. The forest was quiet, almost unnervingly so. No crickets, no wind, not a single sound. The silence was thick, like it was pressing in on them from all sides. Laura felt uneasy, but again she brushed it off. She was used to city noise, and the silence of the woods was just different. That's when she heard it. A faint knock. It came from the cabin. At first, Laura thought it was just the house settling, the wood creaking in the cool night air. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. 3 quick taps. "Did you hear that?" she asked Tom, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, confused. "Hear what?" "The knocking," she said. "It came from inside." Tom laughed it off, thinking she was just being paranoid, but the knocking didn't stop. In fact, it grew louder, more urgent. Laura's heart started to race. "No, really, listen," she insisted. But when they both listened closely, the knocking stopped. Suddenly, it was silent again. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't help it. She turned her head and stared at the cabin, her eyes wide with fear. There, in the darkness of the window, she thought she saw a figure move. "Did you see that?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Tom frowned. "What? There's nothing there." But Laura was sure. There had been someone standing there watching them. Tom shrugged it off as nothing. He suggested they go inside and call it a night. So they did. The friends were already inside, laughing and playing cards, trying to make the most of their weekend. Laura couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The night went on, but Laura couldn't sleep. Every little sound made her jump. The wind, the creaking of the cabin, the sound of the trees brushing against the windows, everything felt amplified in the silence of the woods. Around 2 a.m. she heard it again. The knocking. This time, it was coming from upstairs. The same 3 knocks, quick and sharp. She couldn't ignore it anymore. Laura quietly got out of bed and walked toward the staircase. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet as she tiptoed up to the 2nd floor. Her heart was pounding in her chest. As she reached the top of the stairs, she saw the door to the guest bedroom slightly ajar. Knock, knock, knock. Her breath caught in her throat. The sound was coming from inside that room. She reached for the doorknob, her hand trembling. She turned it slowly and opened the door, expecting to find nothing but an empty room. But what she saw stopped her dead in her tracks. There, standing by the window, was a woman. She was pale, wearing an old-fashioned dress with long black hair falling over her shoulders. Her back was to Laura, but Laura could see that she was staring out into the forest, unmoving. Laura's breath caught in her throat. Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The woman didn't respond. She just stood there, motionless. Laura took a cautious step forward, her heart racing. She reached out to touch the woman's shoulder, but just as her fingers brushed against the fabric of the dress, the woman turned. Laura gasped. The woman's face was twisted in a grotesque way, her skin pale and stretched tight over her bones. Her eyes were dark, hollow pits, and her mouth was a jagged line of sharp teeth. Before Laura could scream, the woman vanished. Gone. Just like that. Laura stumbled backward, her mind racing. She turned and ran out of the room, down the stairs and out into the yard, gasping for breath. She ran straight to Tom, shaking him awake. "Tom!" We have to leave. Now, she pleaded, but Tom was groggy, barely awake. What are you talking about? It's the middle of the night. There's something in that house, she cried, her voice frantic. A woman. She's in there. I saw her. Tom didn't believe her at first, thinking she was just having a nightmare. But when she begged him to go, he finally agreed. They packed up in a hurry, and by the time the others were awake, they were already heading out. But it didn't end there. As they drove away from the cabin, Laura looked back at the dark silhouette of the house in the distance. That's when she saw it, the figure standing in the window watching them, the woman. Laura never went back to that cabin. In fact, she never celebrated her birthday in the same way again. Every year she'd get quiet, almost distant. She couldn't shake the image of that woman, and every time her birthday came around, she remembered the terrifying night she spent in that cabin. So, if you ever decide to rent a cabin in the woods, be careful. You might just find more than you bargained for. And next time you hear a knock at the door in the middle of the night, maybe don't answer. This is the story of a true birthday horror that happened to a friend of mine, Emma. I'm not sure whether you'll believe it, but I can tell you, after hearing it, I'm not quick to dismiss things anymore. It all happened last year, and it still gives me chills every time I think about it. It was Emma's 27th birthday, and she had planned a small gathering at her house. She had just moved into a new apartment, a charming little place in an old building downtown. The apartment was on the top floor, with huge windows that let in a lot of light and gave a stunning view of the city skyline. Emma loved the place. It had character, you know, the kind of old-school charm that made you feel like you were in a different time, the kind of charm you don't get in modern apartments. Anyway, she invited a few close friends, including me, for a small birthday celebration. The plan was simple: some drinks, some food, and a few games. Emma was the type who didn't want anything big or extravagant. Just a quiet night with friends. The night started out great. Everyone was in high spirits, chatting, laughing, and enjoying the night. I remember Emma was in a particularly good mood. She had recently broken up with her boyfriend, Daniel, and she was finally feeling free, like she could take on the world. She kept telling us how much she loved her new apartment, how peaceful it was, and how she felt like it was her sanctuary. But as the night went on, something strange started to happen. The atmosphere in the apartment began to shift. At first, it was subtle, small things, like the flickering of the lights. No one really thought anything of it. Old apartments tend to have issues with their wiring, right? But then, the temperature in the room started to drop. We were all wearing jackets, but we could still feel the chill creeping in. The weird thing was, the rest of the building seemed fine. When we went downstairs to grab something from the car, it wasn't nearly as cold in the hallway as it was in her apartment. It was like the cold was contained in her space. Around midnight, Emma suggested we play a game. She pulled out a Ouija board, something she'd brought from her old place. Now, I'm not a big believer in that sort of thing, but Emma had always been the curious type. She was the kind of person who'd read books on paranormal activity and ghost stories for fun. It was her thing. "Come on," she said, "let's just try it for fun. It's my birthday after all." We all sat around the board, half joking, half nervous. Emma started to ask the typical questions. "Is anyone here with us? Can you give us a sign?" We all laughed nervously, but then something strange happened. The planchette, the little piece that moves on the board, began to move. Slowly at first, just a little nudging, like someone was gently guiding it. We all stared at it, a little stunned. I was the first to laugh, brushing it off as a coincidence. But then, the planchette moved again, faster this time. It slid across the board, spelling out a word: help. Everyone went silent. The air felt heavy, like the room had suddenly become suffocating. Emma's face went pale. "Who's there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The planchette moved again. It spelled out a name. Isla. Isla. None of us knew anyone named Isla. We all exchanged confused looks. Emma seemed especially uneasy now. "What do you want?" she asked. The planchette moved again, but this time it was more erratic, like something was trying to communicate desperately. The lights flickered again, and the temperature dropped even further. The board began to shake. That's when we heard it, the sound of footsteps behind us. It was a soft sound at first, just a light tap 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 on the wooden floor, like someone was walking across the room. We turned around, but the room was empty. No one had moved. It was just us sitting there staring at the board. The footsteps continued, getting closer and closer. I felt my heart start to race. "Did you hear that?" I asked, my voice shaking. Emma nodded, her eyes wide. "What's going on?" she whispered. Then, without warning, the planchette moved again, but this time it was pushed violently to the edge of the board. The lights flickered one last time and went out, plunging us into total darkness. We all jumped up, scrambling to find our phones to turn on the flashlights. Emma's phone was the first to light up the room. The moment the light hit the wall, we saw it. There was a figure standing in the corner of the room, a woman. She was tall and thin, with long dark hair that hung in front of her face. Her body was almost translucent, like she was fading in and out of existence. Her clothes were old-fashioned, almost like something from the 1800s, and she was just standing there watching us. Her presence was suffocating, like the air was being pulled out of the room. I swear for a second I couldn't breathe. My heart felt like it was going to explode. I couldn't move. I wanted to scream, but my voice wouldn't come out. Emma's face was completely white. She was frozen in place, staring at the figure. Then, the woman stepped forward, and she spoke. "I was forgotten," she whispered, her voice barely audible, like a breeze, but it was loud enough to send chills down my spine. "Forgotten on my birthday. Help me." Before we could react, the lights flickered back on. The woman was gone. We were all standing there, staring at each other, trying to process what had just happened. There was a long, tense silence before Emma finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Who was that?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. I don't know," I said, my voice trembling. But that wasn't normal. Emma looked at the Ouija board, and for the first time I saw real fear in her eyes. She whispered something under her breath, almost like she was trying to make sense of it all. The next morning, Emma was a wreck. She didn't want to talk about it. She kept telling us that maybe it was just a prank, that someone must have been playing tricks with the lights and sounds. But I knew she wasn't convinced. Neither was I. That night had felt too real. Later, Emma told me something that chilled me to the bone. She did some research on the building, and it turned out there was a tragic story behind it. The building had once been a hospital, and there had been a patient there named Isla, a young woman who had died on her birthday after being neglected by the staff. No one had noticed her for hours, and by the time they did, It was too late. Her death had been ruled an accident, but the staff had never spoken about it. Emma believed Isla's spirit had been trying to reach out to her. To this day, Emma doesn't celebrate her birthday the same way. She moved out of that apartment soon after, and she hasn't touched a Ouija board since. I haven't either. So, if you ever find yourself in an old building, especially one with a history like that, think twice before you mess with things you don't understand. Because some spirits, like Isla, may never be forgotten, and they may just be waiting for someone to help them. This is the story of something that happened to my friend Olivia. It's a tale that still sends shivers down my spine, even though it happened years ago. I'm not sure if I can explain it, but maybe you'll understand once you hear what happened. It all started on Olivia's 30th birthday. She had been looking forward to it for months, planning, organizing, and making sure everything was perfect. Olivia wasn't one to throw big parties. She was more of a quiet, reserved person, but for some reason, turning 30 felt special to her. She invited a small group of close friends, including me, to a rented cabin out in the woods for the weekend. It was a beautiful spot, nestled deep in the forest, far away from the city's noise. The kind of place that felt peaceful and serene, like time itself slowed down once you entered. The cabin was old, but cozy, with large windows that let you gaze out over the forest, surrounded by towering trees. We arrived Friday afternoon, just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm orange glow over the landscape. The place was perfect for a quiet weekend getaway. Olivia was in high spirits, even more so than usual, and we could tell she was excited to relax and unwind. As the night wore on, we gathered around the fireplace sharing stories and laughing. Olivia seemed like her old self, bright, joyful, and completely carefree. But as the evening stretched on, something began to feel off. It wasn't immediately noticeable, but there was a slight change in the air, a heaviness, a pressure that hung in the atmosphere like a storm waiting to break. It started with small things, unexplained noises, creaks in the floorboards, faint tapping sounds from the walls, whispers in the wind. At first, we all brushed it off as just the house, settling. After all, it was an old cabin and these sounds were to be expected, right? But then, Olivia's birthday dinner arrived, and that's when things really began to take a strange turn. We had just sat down to eat, a delicious meal that Olivia had ordered from a nearby restaurant, when the power went out. Complete darkness. It wasn't a stormy night, no lightning, no thunder. It was just suddenly pitch black, as though the entire world had gone dark at once. We fumbled around, looking for flashlights, but no one could find one. The room was silent, except for the sound of our breath and the occasional rustle of someone moving. And then, from the corner of the room, we heard it. A voice. It was soft at first, almost inaudible, like a whisper in the dark. But it was definitely there. A woman's voice, murmuring something. The words were too faint to make out at first, but it felt like the voice was coming from right beside us, even though we were all sitting together at the table. "Did you hear that?" Olivia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. We all froze. No one else had spoken. It was just that whispering voice in the dark. Then, clearer this time, we heard it again. "Help me." It wasn't just the words that terrified us. It was the tone. The voice was filled with such sorrow, such desperation, that it made my blood run cold. We looked around, trying to find the source, but the darkness was impenetrable. There was no one there. No one could have said those words. We quickly lit a couple of candles, their soft flames flickering in the darkness, casting strange shadows on the walls. But even with the candles, the room felt colder. The air felt heavier, like it was thick with something we couldn't see, something we couldn't understand. Olivia tried to laugh it off. It's just our minds playing tricks on us. We're all tired, right? Let's just get some rest. But the rest of the evening was unsettling. Every time we thought we heard something, every time the silence became unbearable, that same voice would return, softer now, almost drowned out by the wind outside. "Help me," it whispered. "Help me." We were all on edge by the time we finally went to bed, still unsure of what was going on. But the worst part of the night was yet to come. In the middle of the night, I woke up with a jolt. At first, I thought I had just been dreaming, but then I heard it again. The voice clearer this time, coming from somewhere outside the cabin. It was saying my name. "Charlotte." I sat up, heart pounding. My eyes scanned the room, but it was still pitch black. No sound. The wind had stopped, the air eerily still. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I tried to wake Olivia, but when I turned to her bed, I found that she wasn't there. Panic surged through me. I quickly got out of bed and made my way into the hallway, calling her name, but there was no answer. The cabin was silent, too silent. It was as if the entire world had paused. I finally found her in the living room, standing motionless by the window, staring out into the dark forest. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and unblinking. "Olivia?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What are you doing?" She didn't respond. She just stood there, as though she couldn't hear me. I walked up to her, my feet heavy on the creaky wooden floor, and gently touched her shoulder. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. And that's when I saw it. The fear, the terror in her eyes. It wasn't her anymore. It was like she was looking through me, like she wasn't even aware that I was standing there. And then she spoke. Her voice was no longer Olivia's voice. It was the voice we had heard earlier. The same soft, desperate whisper. "Help me. Help me." I froze in place, unable to move. My mind was racing. I had no idea what to do. Then, before I could react, Olivia took a step forward, as though something invisible was pulling her toward the door. I grabbed her arm, trying to stop her, but she didn't resist. She didn't seem to even know I was there. I had no choice but to follow her outside. The air was frigid, the ground cold beneath my feet. The moon was full, casting an eerie light on everything. Olivia walked straight toward the trees, toward the darkness of the forest, without saying a word. It wasn't until we were deep in the woods that I realized we weren't alone. In the distance, faint figures moved, shadows dancing between the trees. There were whispers too, many voices this time, all pleading for help. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up as the figures began to move closer. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew one thing for sure. We needed to leave. I grabbed Olivia and pulled her back toward the cabin, calling her name over and over. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she snapped out of it. Her eyes cleared, and she looked at me bewildered. What happened?" she asked, her voice shaky. We ran back to the cabin as fast as we could, and by the time we reached the door, the figures in the woods had vanished. It was like they were never there. The next day, Olivia insisted on leaving early. She didn't want to talk about what happened, but I could see the fear in her eyes. And after that night, she never went back to that cabin. To this day, she hasn't celebrated a birthday since. She won't even visit the forest where we stayed. As for me, I still don't know what we saw that night. But every time I think about it, I hear those whispers again. Help me. And I wonder if Olivia will ever truly escape whatever it was that found her in the dark.